In 2002, at the age of 17, I found cocaine. Uh, it was the beginning of a run of insanity that lasted about 3 months. I had already been drinking and smoking pot, and I was already well into my disease of addiction and alcoholism, and cocaine acted as a supercharger. And I went from an otherwise mostly functional kid who was taking a year off from college to driving down the road, shooting two people who were chasing me, to committing a robbery, to just completely being out of my mind. And I was arrested, and I should have been, and I needed to be, and I would have hurt someone else or hurt myself had I not been arrested. Um, uh, I pled guilty to the charges because I had done them. There's no point in trying to fight something that I had done, and accepting responsibility for it. Even though at that point I don't know that I fully understood the impact of what I'd done, but accepting responsibility was an important part of the process. And so I went in for sentencing, and the day of sentencing, my guidelines, my state sentencing guidelines, were called for 8 to 13 years. They were modified that day to be 10 to 16 years, and the judge sentenced me to 32 years. So he doubled the high point of the guidelines and gave me 32 years in prison. And I pretty much lost my mind. It was one of those things I did not know how to cope with. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where I was going. I had a lot of love and support in my life, and that was really what saved my life. Because if it hadn't been for that, I don't know where I would have been. I was so lost and so angry, but also so shamed, like full of shame and full of guilt and full of just kind of disgust with myself and the things I'd done and the person I'd become. So it was a very toxic mix, and it took a lot of time and a lot of work to dig out of that. And I can get into that in later videos, but it was a long process. And that process culminated in 2021 on August 16th. With more than 10 years left on my sentence, I was called into the office where at the prison I was at, and they said, "Mr. Crossan, you're leaving Coffeewood today." I had applied for a petition for clemency, which is just an incredible long shot, and the governor had granted it. You know, the fact that I had been sentenced to double the high point of the guidelines, that I'd been barely over 18 years old when it happened, that I had worked so hard, that I had mentored other people, I had worked with other people, I'd bettered myself, I'd gotten an education. Those things he deemed extraordinary circumstances and said that it warranted my release. So I'm still on probation. I'm still dealing with the technical side, but I was able to get out of prison and start a life. And it was bizarre. It was out of nowhere. I mean, I had filed the petition, but it was still basically one day I was in prison, and an hour and a half later, I was hugging my mother and meeting my girlfriend at the end of the drive. And then going and experiencing life and going into Walmart and going into Costco and then, cooking and cleaning and having to pay bills and kind of jumping headfirst into, middle age. And not knowing how to deal with that, but at the same time figuring it out and being really grateful to be figuring this out rather than figuring out how I was going to make my next swole in prison or what time we were going to work out, because this is far preferable. So yeah, this is my story. This is me documenting the journey and hoping that someone can benefit from a better understanding of what the experience of prison is, what my experience of change was, and then what those struggles are with people getting out. Because I think the same thing applies to people in many settings, people getting out of institutionalized settings, be it hospitals, be it the military, be it other things. Their situations are different, but there are parallels that can inform. And then further, just looking at the challenges of people who get out that don't have the love and support that I did, and whether that's good for society. Because you have a lot of people who say, well, we need to punish people and we don't need to give prisoners anything, we don't need to give ex-cons anything. But if giving ex-cons, the opportunity to get an education is going to keep them from reoffending, well, that helps everybody. I mean, that keeps people safe. Denying them that education or denying them those social services would then essentially ensure that they're going to reoffend, if that's true. I mean, we really need to look at the science. But the idea of saying we just need to punish people forgets that punishment tends to beget more punishment. And sometimes the people who are hurting can hurt other people, because I never hurt other people when I wasn't hurting. I never was of sound mind and sound judgment and decided to hurt somebody. It really was an expansion of my inability to cope with things. And if it's something as simple as services that teach people to cope with discursive emotions and addiction and difficult situations, just that investment in people can then save future pain from other people. So, let me know if you have any questions, you have any ideas, let me know. I'm just trying to share this journey and hope that it helps.